Hello, everybody. Mr. Brown here with the Choose Well Program podcast. I am enjoying making these podcasts, and I hope you're enjoying consuming them, whether you're watching them on our YouTube channel or listening to them on a podcast platform like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, whatever podcatcher that you use. I'm grateful that you're out there listening. We've been getting comments from some of you, and we're grateful for that. Whether you're an educator, you're a parent, or even students, you're welcome to listen to this as well. Our goal is to help schools build better cultures one choice at a time. For more information about all we do, check out the ChooseWellProgram.com. Again, it's the ChooseWellProgram.com. In this episode, we're talking about anxiety in kids. And I'm talking to Dr. Terri Daniels, who is an expert because she's a doctor. No, she's an expert because of years of experience and her knowledge as a parent and as one who got her doctorate degree on helping how parents can help their kids in their education, but also how important parents are, period. I think sometimes our culture has made us think that we're not as important parents, that our kids need other people. Don't believe the hype. Don't believe the lie that your kids don't need you. Because I've talked to them, and they will say all the time need it. Because what happens is the kids start to rebel and kind of buck away from parents to get older, and then we start to go, okay, well, you don't want me. I don't want you either. I ain't going to be, No. Parents, we got to be there for them because they need us more than they know, and they want us more than we know as well. So in this episode, we're talking about this, and we're going to talk about anxiety in several ways. That anxiety is a natural part of the body's response to stress. We're talking about how it's become so abnormal to have any kind of problems. We create this world. We think you're never going to have problems. You have any problems, you're anxious about them. Life is full of problems. We need to teach our kids about teaching kids how to be resilient because they need that. Check out this podcast with Dr. Daniels and I discussing anxiety in kids. There's a lot of talk about anxiety. Teens, kids being anxious, adults as well being anxious. And so today we're going to talk about that idea. Anxiety is normal. It's a normal emotion.
Anxiety is a normal emotion. Anxiety, the definition is it's your body's natural response to stress. It's natural. We all experience anxiety. And I think probably what worries me a little bit is that the amount of not only children, but adults too, that are facing anxiety diagnoses these days. And some of it, I think, is normal. It's normal. And we have created this illusion that life is supposed to be perfect. And if you don't don't feel perfect and you don't feel happy all the time, something is wrong with you. And so if something's wrong with you, we need to fix it instead of experiencing it and realizing that it's normal and we can get through it. Now, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist.
So we need to run our disclaimer here that this is only meant for entertainment. And
Yes, I am a doctor of education, and I will say that a lot of what I see is based on my experience and on my research. But I'm not saying that there is an anxiety that exists out there that is concerning for students. Here I go again with students, but with children, with teens. But I think that some of it is normal and is not looked at as normal. So I guess what I would say is think back as a parent, think back to your own growing up. Think back to your own teenage years. And were you never feeling that anxiety, uncertainty, oh my gosh, I'm going to go ask a girl to dance across the room and she may say no.
Don't get me started on that because these boys these days they don't know they just pick up a phone and text the girl. Like you don't have to go see her. You don't have to do the walk of shame back to the class. Or even if we wanted to send a letter, you write a little note and circle yes or no, right? Everybody saw the note being passed except the teacher, right? And when you got the note, everybody could look at your facial expression and know, oh, he got dissed.
Right. And that was anxiety. You had to put yourself out there. That's part of anxiety. Overcoming it is you put yourself out there. You either get rewarded with that yes or disappointed with that no. But you know what? You didn't die out there from it.
Right.
You got over it, you survived it, and it makes you stronger. And I just see so many kids these days experiencing this and thinking it's not okay, something's wrong with them, and it's normal.
And I think that may actually lead to more anxiety, more anxiousness. I mean, it's like a downward cycle. I feel anxious about something. I shouldn't feel anxious. I shouldn't have a problem, but I'm feeling anxious anyway. And so it's just that downward cycle of I'm just feeling worse and worse and worse. And I don't know about panic attacks, anything like that, but I can see how that can lead to a panic attack where you're just overly, excessively anxious. And I'm looking at this definition we looked at. It says, the feeling or anticipation about what's to come, or apprehension about what's to come, like the first day of school or going to an interview. I mean, we all feel those senses of anxiety about things that happen in our lives, but I think we live in a world where it's more intense and it's more excessive, and I don't think we know how to deal with it.
I agree with you, and I think that part of dealing with it is to deal with it. Right?
Right.
I mean,
keep it simple, right? Dr. Terri?
Yeah,
Dr. Daniels, keeping it simple.
Hey, when I did my oral defense, do you not think I had apprehension? Of course I did. And that's part of what I needed. If I just went in there and didn't have that feeling of, after all this hard work, what's going to happen with it? I mean, we all do that. You go to an interview, you go to whatever. Our kids are going to face this eventually at some point in their lives. And if we try to make them think that what they are experiencing now is somehow wrong, what's that going to do when they're an adult? We see this all the time because so many people are in therapy or trying to find help. And I don't want people out there to think that if you go to therapy, it's wrong. No, yeah. I mean, it's great. I've been through therapy. I strongly think everybody should go through therapy. I think it helps.
And it could be for a season. I mean, I think, there's nothing wrong with seeking help because everybody needs help at some point. Like, so it's nothing wrong with therapy. But I see what you're saying. And let me ask you this question. Could it be, and we're going to talk about sources of anxiety.
Right.
But could it be that we have such this entitlement or expectation of perfection that everything's supposed to go our way, to where if any hint of that, then we get in a spiral of anxiousness. In other words, are we really challenging our kids to do hard things, or are they just expecting life to look like Instagram all the time?
I think that they are expecting that, and I don't know that we do all of that. I think that parents do some of that.
We contribute to
it, but right. We know our society does. We know social media does. We know our kids' world is surrounded with this idea of perfection.
A facade.
A facade for sure. And if you don't have that, or something sways that, our kids are getting a message that something's wrong with them. Again, it was in an earlier podcast I talked about.
Way to go. Plug the podcast.
Yeah, good job. Yeah, there you go. Don't ask kids like, what's wrong with you, when you're frustrated with them because they're being different than you think they should be. That's sending a message that something's wrong with them. And then here comes that feeling of, I can't measure up. And then that leads to, I don't look right. I don't act right. Something's going on. And here comes that anxiety. A few years ago, I had a young man, 8th grader, come into my office, and he was really, really upset and telling me what he was feeling, etc. And he started crying, and he said, I don't know what's wrong with me. And I said to him, it's called anxiety, and it's normal. And I think it's really important for us as parents to help our kids know that it is a natural, normal emotion. Does it feel great? No, it does not. It doesn't feel great. But we all experience it. We all go through it. And then help them to find healthy ways to get through it. Because anxiety is going to be there. It's going to be there. There's going to be that first day of school. Right. There's going to be, when I was a kid, I didn't like going to slumber parties. I was one of those kids that didn't want to spend the night at other people's houses. And I would have anxiety. I can remember. I would go to slumber parties because I didn't want to miss out, but I didn't fall asleep. I made myself sick. I made myself sick. Breakfast at you remember those things, right?
Right.
That was anxiety. I mean, anxiety, we have these things. If we feel uncomfortable, we want to not feel uncomfortable. Right? That's our natural. We don't want to feel that way. So what do? But we're labeling it as something, I think it's easy to label now as something that is not normal when it is.
And I see, and again, I'm just telling you what I see in my experience. I could be wrong. Let me state that. But sometimes I feel that some of these kids are gravitating toward it to belong, to be a part of something. I have anxiety. It's like a badge of honor. I have anxiety. So to get attention sometimes. I'm not saying that they don't have anxiety, but it seems like we weren't using those terms before. Now the term is out there so much. It's like, let me say I have it too. Let me grab onto this. Let me identify, look at me, I have anxiety. And even sometimes posting on social media, it used to be you never post anything negative on social media, but now it's you post anything to get attention. And I'm not saying they don't have it, but it just seems like it's in vogue to say I'm dealing with depression or I have anxiety. I don't know. Do you see that with some of your students or?
I'm sure there is some of that, and it does get attention. What I see is I would say a good amount of them see it as something's wrong with them. So they have it.
So they feel like they shouldn't be anxious about things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And that because they are anxious, they need special treatment. Okay.
Gotcha.
So kind of like a disability. Like I have an anxiety disorder, something's wrong with me. And so a lot of times I will talk to the students about how you'd be surprised at how many of these quote unquote meetings I have with students or with students and parents of students that have anxiety. You're not the only one. That kind of shows or makes them feel, in my experience, like, oh, good, because they're feeling like something's wrong with them.
So the parents will feel like, okay, great. The parents not great to have it, but there's other kids who are dealing with this too.
Right, and right. I think the parents, again, I'm just speaking generally from experience right now. I think the parents don't probably know how many kids I see in school that do deal with it or have been diagnosed with it.
So when you say diagnosed, they're diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, or they just they have anxiety. Is there a difference when they're diagnosed? Does it say it's a difference between those two, or just they're diagnosed with anxiety, which means they get medicine? I mean, is there a spectrum of that when this diagnosis are involved?
There's a spectrum of it, but I don't know it always is clarified to the child or the parents. I don't know. And again, I don't want to overstep and get into the medical side because there are anxiety disorders. But a lot of times now it's very common for parents to come and say they would like a special plan or a special accommodation for their child because their child experiences anxiety.
Now, that's, I guess, my question. So do they come and say, hey, the doctor, here's a diagnosis.
Yes.
They say, my kid is, so we want an IEP or special plan.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't just get an IEP for anxiety. So that's a whole nother issue.
Other thing. But they're asking for some kind of special plan.
Yes.
Even though it's not an IEP, they're asking for
a 504 or whatever. Yeah, they're asking for special accommodations for their child.
And you get a lot of those.
That. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
A lot. And I think more so probably because we have been going through the COVID-19 and the kids are on distance learning, isolated, hybrid model, whatever type of school program that's going on in their own district. So I think we know that there's more anxiety, depression, et cetera, being reported among teens and kids. With the COVID issues and being home and isolated. But even before COVID, we were seeing more and more of it.
So let's talk about that. Let's transition to some of the sources we see, some of the sources of anxiety that you see in your experience.
So I would say there's a lot. And it could, again, range in spectrum. I think a lot is kids being in middle school, again, middle means they're in the middle, so they're learning who they are. They're just experiencing growing up. And so they may have questions of different things in their lives. Again, am I normal? So perhaps it's dealing with gender identity, okay? That's a normal thing to deal with when you're in middle school, just kind of realizing your own, who you are. That could be peer pressure, kids noticing them. I mean, middle school and high school, but in particular, I think middle school even more so, is you want to fit in. Kids want to fit in, right? They want to be, they don't want to stand out from the crowd. They don't want to be called on by their teachers in class. So I think we see those kinds of things. They put pressure on themselves. I see a lot of parents putting pressure on kids, and we're talking parenting. And I, again, don't want it to come across as parents, you're not doing things right, but please be kind. Don't expect your kids to be perfect. Lot of pressure coming from parents.
So far you said there's I'm writing down
Right.
two sources, external, internal. So external would be some of the, peer pressure in school. Internal would be their own personal identity, wanting to fit in, wanting to be accepted. Like, I feel like everybody needs acceptance, affirmation. They all need it. So that's part of it.
That is definitely part of it. And then I would have to say the social media aspect cannot be denied.
And I think that's, for me, is because I think social media is a social experiment. I think, and I don't know if you've seen some of those new documentaries out.
Social
Dilemma.
And yeah.
And I think this is an experiment, but we take what's normal and then we have exponentially threw it on top of that. Like these cell phones and access to the world, and more importantly, the world having access to them and not knowing to do it. So back in the day, we dealt with the peer pressure of seeing kids in our class, but we had no idea what kids in Italy were doing. And we couldn't care less.
Right.
We didn't care what kids in Brazil were doing or kids in another state were doing. We were consumed with what's going on right here in my little small town or my city that I live in. Now we're dealing with comparing ourselves to all of the world.
So comparing is one thing, and the other thing I would say is when we were younger without social media, something may have happened at school. Maybe, you got in a fight with someone or were arguing or whatever. You could go home and you didn't have to deal with that till the next morning at school. You may have not wanted to go back to school because,
but you can't get away with it now. It's all over. Yeah.
No, it doesn't go away, right? So now you go home, you've got your phone, you're looking, kids are talking about you, they're saying what happened, and then all of a sudden I said this in another podcast as well, discipline, social media has made administration a really big, we deal with a lot of cyberbullying, and kids can be mean on there. Adults too, let's face it.
Right.
And so another thing on that's kind of another role model thing is parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Don't be bullies to other people or be saying negative things like that in front of your kids. You are setting a role model.
When we were growing up, you had to attach yourself to the phone that had a cord, right? But at a certain point, that phone was put away. Did no one have access to your life after a certain time, right? You couldn't call her house. Mm-hmm. Hello, no, what time, son, do you know what time it is? No, you cannot talk to my daughter after just a click, right?
Right.
That's number one. Number two, as you mentioned, the only little bit of outside we had was he said, she said over the phone, and that was very limited. But now it is free reign. All day, every day, kids have access to each other. They have access to what other people saying about them. They have access to post anything all day long, every day. It can't be healthy.
It cannot be healthy, and I know it's not. It's not. And I would strongly suggest that parents do get involved in that piece and
cut the cord.
Do not let your kids take their phones to bed with them at night. And you know what? If that's their alarm clock, get them an old-fashioned one or whatnot.
It might work better, actually.
Because these kids are on TikTok and Instagram and whatever, Snapchat, all of those, they are on in the middle of the night.
Right.
And they tell me. Tell me, I'll tell you, the kids are pretty darn honest with me.
Do you remember the simile I did? And I asked that to your kids. Hands went up. Like, how many on your phones all night? How many wake up when they wake up when they get a notification? And the thing, as an adult, I can't handle that. Like, how would we expect our middle school kids to handle that? And we can do I think we should do an episode on just giving parent advice with social media and cell phones, period. Because I think there's some guidelines that needs to be in place with our kids to help them grow and develop, to be responsible with these things and not just let it go, hey, here you go. But I think it's a huge source of anxiety. And I will admit, I tell the kids all the time when I speak, I would not want to be a kid today. It is much tougher to be a kid today. So I'm not minimizing this anxiety because there's so many more sources in the social media and cell phones. I can't even, it's not even 2 times. It's like exponentially more than what we dealt with.